Hey guys, and welcome back to part 5 of customizing THF Hyper Magnum. This is the last video for this project. I'm going to be finishing everything off, and as you can see I've taken off the Dalsim arm and I'm left with the shoulder assembly unit. It was just a couple of screws to get the insignia holder off, which I've gone back over and taped up fully to make sure that no extra paint goes on any of the pieces. But looking at it again, it needed a bit more, so I went over it and made sure it's fully covered up. So I've taped over the pieces in a way that will let me take off the tape in one fell swoop. Back to the booth. So we've got our airbrush again, and to paint the piece I'm just going to use some of my white Vallejo surface primer. This is going to stick to the plastic without any issues at all, and as always give it a good shake for 30 seconds before you pop it in. A drop of flow improver just to lube the needle and to give me a bit more time to work with it in case I need to. Get any of the excess flow improver out now, making sure the airbrush is nice and clean for the primer. A few test dots, seems to be going okay. And though I've neglected to put my gloves on due to my overconfidence getting the best of me, I am still overconfident that I won't get any paint on my hands because this is such a concentrated area, and thanks to the tape I can see exactly the area that I want to work with. So I'm going back and forth in small circular motions, just making sure I get every bit of it covered as evenly and smoothly as I can. That's looking okay. It's a bit heavy in the middle, so I'll just focus on some of those edges a bit more to make sure it's completely flat and even. You may notice that I'm getting quite close with the airbrush now. Feel free to tell me that I'm doing this wrong, but I did change the pressure on the compressor to make sure it's not too high, and after a better inspection in the light I noticed there was just a bit more to be done. You could say I missed a spot. And now for the most satisfying part. I'm going to take my hobby blade to help remove this masking tape, and I have to tell you there is nothing quite like this. Getting the tape in the right places where I connected it all with the second layer to make sure it comes off in one go is going to help me avoid touching the paint and messing up the, in my opinion, perfect finish. It was only a little while ago that I had a masking competition with a close friend of mine on an SD Gundam, and I have to say I failed, but I learnt a valuable lesson, and going back to the drawing board I've learnt to layer my tape properly so that it comes off in one peel. Now using this blade I am being very careful. All it takes is for one slip and I could end up stabbing the plastic and creating either a terrible scratch, or even worse, I could actually take a chunk out of the plastic. And oh yes, how satisfying is that? Looks like a factory finish. Parts back on, and there we have his top half where we've done all the customization. It's starting to come together pretty nicely. We've only got one piece of the puzzle left, which is the water slide decal insignia. Now I make these myself using water slide decal paper, and I did actually pay a graphic designer quite a bit of money to turn these insignias from their standard low resolution JPEG to high res vector images. I have no idea what that means. All I know is that it cost me way more than I wanted it to, and I'm not using scissors because I think it's a terrible idea when you're working with things so small. I'm just applying a bit of pressure with my hobby knife, and thanks to how sharp it is, it gets through it without any problems. Now you'll notice that I've left a huge edge on, and that's again because I can take as much material off as I want, but I can never put it back on. So going with the big chunky bits first, I want to follow the natural curvature of the decal, which in the places at the bottom is pretty easy because they're just straight lines, but when it gets to the cheeks of the insignia, I need to be a bit more careful because they have a slight indentation, and then for the crown piece it comes out. And going over the top there's also just a tiny bit of curvature, so I want to be careful and let the knife do most of the hard work in this case. Now this is normally the part of my builds which I dread the most, but it seems to be going okay. Now the decal itself is on a transparent background, so when we transfer it across to Magnum, all that's going to be visible is the red. That white that you see is just the paper, and the other thing in shot is my cat. I think my hobby knife is as sharp as her claws, but I've asked her for help in the past and it's ended up a mess. If you are having trouble doing this freehand, you can always use the guides on the cutting mats to line up your angles properly, or to go one step further you can just use a bit of masking tape to tape the decal to the mat and then cut it that way. Really is a test of your patience. There's a lot of fine detail work here, so go slowly and just cut as close as you can to the actual paint of the decal without going into it, because then that decal will be utterly worthless. And I think that's as close as I'm able to get it now. Time for application. In the little silver container on the right hand side, I've just got some water. First of all, I'm applying some Mr. Mark Setter, which I find works really well for helping set the decal onto the area. And then I just want to pop my decal on top of the water, not completely submerge it in. I want the back to be wet so that it slides off easily when I'm trying to position the red on top of the whites. On the left side, next to the Mark Setter, I've got some Mark Softer, and that helps soften the edges of the decal if they're a bit too hard. Different people use different tools for handling their decals. I've always been a fan of angled tweezers, just because I can hold them open a bit to get larger decals off. And I'm going to set it roughly where I want it, and using a very fine cotton bud from Tamiya, of which a pack will set you back around £4.50. Don't quote me on this, I don't know exactly how many you get in a pack, but I find it's roughly 50 pieces. With the tweezers I'll move the paper away, and with the cotton buds I slowly bring the decal into position. Now what most people will do is hold the decal with the cotton bud and then use the tweezers to pull the paper away, in theory leaving the decal exactly where you want it. I prefer to do it the long way, just because this has to be in a very specific position. We've got that white insignia placement on Magnum already, so I really don't have a lot of room to work with, and because it's raised as well, I don't want any part of the decal hanging over the edge, because that makes it more prone to snagging and being pulled off when I'm handling the figure. Also, it must be said, I'm being overly cautious. If you watch other tutorials on YouTube on applying water slides, I highly doubt you'll come across anyone as pedantic as me in trying to get this absolutely perfect, because with Magnum it's been quite a short project looking back on it, but all of the detail is very fine and I just want it to be perfect so that I can move on to the next project without worrying about coming back and doing any cleanup on this. So just some final adjustments on the decal to get it perfectly into place. And encore corrupted footage. Time skip. Everything went fine. As you can see, the decal is in its place and it doesn't look out of place. It's reminiscent of the Takara model now, which is the look I was going for. And just briefly going over some of the changes we made to the antenna, the eyes, the throat, the insignia there, the shoulder stacks, which had some nasty nub marks on them, the chest with a piece of paper behind it, and Magnum's rifle now with a gloss top coat, so it's not looking as flat and matte as it was when we first laid down the paint. And I've got to say, it's got a really good shine to it in the light, and the main seam lines that were on the barrel have been removed. I've asked Magnum to leave me 5 stars on TripAdvisor and Yelp, though given how much I've insulted him in his time at the workshop, that might not be possible. So again, just a really tight close-up of Magnum. I got him cleaned up with some rubbing alcohol, made him nice and shiny, and the insignia is missing from this bit of the footage because I've edited it incorrectly. Again, feel free to destroy me in the comments below. And that brings us to the end of this project. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Roll montage.